Did Fisker just sentence all of its oceans owned by individuals to death? And is the ocean the new New York taxi? What just happened? Let's dive right in. In this video, I'll address the following topics. Fisker just selling all of its remaining fleet. What does that mean for owners? What does that mean for New York City? And who's going to pay for it? As well as another recall. This one needing a physical solution, and it makes every ocean kind of a ticking time bomb. And we know Fisker doesn't have the capability to fix your ocean if you own one. So who is going to fix it? As well as much more from my peppy yet down-to-earth, optimistically sarcastic point of view. And all of this at the exact same time as the major media outlets break the story. And maybe you're not excited about reading a 72-page legal document, but I've been waiting for this one for a while.
She's acceptable, Your Honor.
Let's start with the recall. Number 21 says there were 3 recalls recently. That's the Telltales, the power modules, and the outer door handles. Telltales and power modules were an over-the-air update. That's 2.1. Outer door handles is brand new, hasn't been dealt with yet. Fisker says they're going to continue to deal with it. 22. Debtors voluntarily issued a 4th recall stop sale because a printed circuit board assembly attached to the cabin electric water pump in Fisker's EV is susceptible to failure. Water pumps are typically associated with cooling. Cooling needs to be done for the battery system. This recall may be saying your Fisker is a ticking time bomb, and some people are experiencing turtle mode or limited power mode because this has already happened to them. And we don't know if any owners will ever have a solution, but the buyers of these vehicles will. More on that in a second. The June 26th stop sale hold affects all or nearly all Fisker EVs, including the entire Fisker inventory. So if you think yours isn't going to have the problem, unfortunately that's not the case. The pre-petition stop sale holds affecting a sale vehicle will be addressed and cleared by the seller prior to the sale of such vehicle to the buyer. That means Fisker is going to fix each and every one of these American Lease purchased Oceans as they are sold to them. The buyer, that's American Lease, will not operate any such stop sale vehicle until the June 26th stop sale hold has been cleared for any such vehicle. That's gotta grind your gears a little bit if you're an owner. Why haven't you been promised your recall will be remedied? Instead, they just put you on a list. And if you're wondering if these recalls and their timeliness is coincidental, likely it's not. If you've ever bought a house, this is part of buying the house. Well, if you want us to pay the asking price, we need you to fix the toilet in the upstairs bedroom.
Does the toilet lease heat up? No.
American Lease knew these cars had this problem, and likely Fisker did as well, and in order to make the sale, Fisker had to agree to recall the vehicles and fix them all before the sale. Don't fix the toilet? We're not paying your asking price. And there's a reason why Fisker's in such a hurry. Fisker needs to pay, subject to the cash collateral order, certain outstanding amounts owed to vendors. As of the petition date, debtors estimate that's up to $1.5 million in storage, shipping, and similar services. So where the cars are sitting is costing Fisker a ton of money, which is why this sale is so advantageous. But that's not the only reason. The money Fisker needs for payroll is about to run out. At least that's what Fisker says. The U.S. Trustee, as well as representation from U.S. Bank and the Fisker Owners Association are trying, as we speak, to sort out if that's true. There was an emergency hearing on Wednesday. And what better way to tell the story of all that's happening right now than through a courtroom drama?
Would you show Shakespeare, please, the emails?
But first, we need to talk about the actual terms of this fleet sale. I'm just going to highlight the parts of the agreement that I think might be interesting for you. Fisker shall have no obligation of repair or maintenance of the vehicles, and vehicles are sold as is. That's number 5 with parts. Vehicle software maintenance. Fisker shall have no obligation to update the vehicles beyond software 2.1. If you're an owner, you need to take note of this. The vehicles exclude the following: Canadian configured vehicles located in Canada, prototypes or pre-production vehicles, and vehicles that are prohibited to be sold as a passenger vehicle in the United States or Canada, or prohibited from being used for spare parts in the United States. And here's where it gets interesting. The buyer shall be and is hereby granted a royalty-free, non-exclusive, non-assignable, non-sublicensable license solely to access and use in the operation of the vehicles all relevant source code or other proprietary software operating elements, as well as existing developer work.
Oh, whoops. Whoopsie.
So they have a royalty-free license to all of Fisker's IP. Does that mean they just bought Fisker? Let me know in the comments. Promptly following the effective date, Fisker will use commercially reasonable efforts to facilitate the buyer's access to the subscription-based services and related software with respect to the vehicles. So your software in your Fisker isn't protected by Fisker, but the American lease models are.
Get out! Get out! Yo!
And here's where it starts to really hurt. The vehicle pricing is $16,500 for new vehicles. Previously titled vehicles are $3,200. But there's only 351 of those, but does that hurt the resale even more? Let me know your thoughts. Damaged vehicles with repair costs in excess of $5,000 would be purchased at a value not less than $2,500, but values may exceed $2,500 on a case-to-case basis. The full price is not to exceed $46,250,000, and there's 3,231 vehicles in total. The buyer agrees to take possession of the vehicles at their current locations and assume all post-transaction storage and logistics costs. So that's probably huge. This one's great. At least one Fisker employee shall remain employed by Fisker at Fisker's expense and shall remain responsible for coordinating and confirming that the June 26th stop sale hold has been cleared for each stop sale vehicle. So I feel sorry for this at least one person. You've got a big job. And I guess the silver lining is you'll know when your job is over because you will have cleared all the stop sale vehicles. The vehicles sold to buyer under the agreement shall not be resold by buyer until a minimum of 12 months following the effective date. That's huge. American Lease just bought all these vehicles, and if they want to lease them out to people, they can, but if they want to sell them, they can also do that. They just have to wait 12 months. Further, the buyer shall reimburse Fisker for all operational costs associated with fulfillment of the sales transactions of the vehicles, including costs associated with upgrading the vehicles to version 2.1 and other costs to be mutually agreed upon by the parties, except resources associated with securing and transferring the vehicles and titles, MCOs. And then finally in the document it shows where they are and how much value is in each lot. Resnick, who represents Fisker, filed a motion to shorten notice regarding the sale of these Fisker Oceans to American Lease, and gave the following reasons.
By next Friday, July 12th, the debtors will be unable to fund vital business expenses, including payroll.
Resnick continued.
We anticipate delivering 200 of the cars by next Friday to American Leasing and receiving approximately $2.8 billion of proceeds immediately by the end of next week, and using those funds to make payroll and other payments on Monday, July 15th.
An expedited consideration would be 7 days. Normally, this kind of action takes 21 days. Resnick clarified.
And we simply do not have the cash collateral, any cash on hand today sufficient to pay those amounts expected to be paid by July 15th.
The problem is a committee of unsecured creditors was just established and was not provided any time to review the action or the sale documents. Resnick highlights this.
We understand that the timing is a little bit unfortunate as it relates to the committee. The committee has been appointed yesterday. We understand that they are hiring counsel today. This was has been reported to us.
Resnick concedes that it's not a lot of time, then highlights some details about the proceeds of the sale.
I would note importantly that the sale order does not allow for the distribution of any proceeds or use of any of the proceeds, and so that will be handled separately in cash collateral order or otherwise.
Resnick continues.
We find ourselves in this position in which we had more cash. Of course, we wish we had more time, but the facts are what the facts are.
Next, the court is asked to submit a declaration by the CRO supporting the fleet sale. And now, the U.S. trustee, Linda Richendorfer, has the floor. And she does not hesitate.
Your Honor, I guess sometimes in life there are coincidences that are really coincidences, and then there are coincidences that have us scratch our heads.
She references some occurrences from recent dates.
During the call on the 26th of June, I asked when would the motion for sale be filed. It was my understanding it was going to be filed sometime last week. And I was told that it would be several weeks before the sale motion could be filed, because on that very day there was something called a stock hold issued. And what that means is that they could not sell the vehicle because there was an issue with circuit boards, and hunts.
She continued that 2 days later, June 28th, no meeting was held because a time could not be established where everyone would be available, then highlighted additional occurrences on that day.
June 28th, at some point that day, don't know which came first, my email or the buyer signing the agreement of sale. On June 30th, which was Sunday, the debtor signed the agreement of sale.
She further states additional communication with the debtors was made, but no mention of the sale documents being signed until 9 p.m. the night before the emergency hearing.
And while the sale order, we're told, doesn't say what will happen with the funds that are recovered from the sale, it, though, does set the limit at what will happen as to how much will be recovered from the sale.
Additionally, she mentions she hasn't had time to read the full motion and that other parties need time as well, and inevitably objects to the timeline. She isn't the only one. Representation from the Fisker Owners Association has concerns as well.
We have concerns around the sale and the impact it'll have on existing vehicle owners with respect to supply chain issues, software updates, a litany of issues that we think need to be addressed as part of this proposed transaction.
And the council is right. It's a litany of issues. Let's head to the speculation zone, shall we? First, it puts the fleet first in line for the recalls, both with regard to parts and with regard to manpower. Next, it establishes the future value of Oceans at a maximum of $16,000. It releases liability for Fisker to ever release more software above 2.1, as the promise is 2.1 and never more for American Lease. And in the event a newer version is released, likely another bug fix, it will likely only be applied to the American Lease fleet, as they have access to the source code and the developer work, as well as whatever else Fisker gives them. Cloud servers and connectivity are included in the deal for the sale, but only to the American Lease fleet. The time bomb becomes twofold now. The circuit board will eventually fail, putting the Ocean in turtle mode, eventually bricking it. And the value of the current Oceans will be absolutely pummeled after 12 months when American Lease decides to start selling its units, releasing a superior Ocean to those that owners have into the wild, because they will have had access to repairs, source code, service potential updates, whereas owner cars have none of that. Not even a warranty, and the Fisker Ocean Association knows that. More on that later. The license that American Lease has is now of great value, and with value comes cost. So, in the event an Ocean owner wants to keep the car, the precedent has been set that Fisker, or whatever that ends up being on the other side of bankruptcy, has an opportunity to charge owners individually for cloud services, 4G, navigation, software updates, and more, making the resale value of the individually owned cars tank and causing the cost of owning them to skyrocket. Correct me in the comments. U.S. Bank's representation has similar sentiments.
And I can confirm what the U.S. Trustee stated, that the committee was recently appointed. They met for the first time yesterday. They are interviewing counsel as we speak. We would ask that at the very least the court adjourns this hearing until Monday to allow for committee counsel to get in place and have that dialogue in advance on moving forward on the sale motion. But we do echo everything that Ms. Richendorfer said, the U.S. Trustee's office said with respect to the speed here and the need for the unsecured creditors as well as my client to review and understand what's going on here so that they can adequately respond to the sale motion.
Resnick states the resolution to the stop sale is adequate.
We do think we have a sensible resolution of that issue, and through a combination of the buyer, Ken Fisker, employees, as well as getting parts from abroad, we have a process in place to actually manage this water pump issue.
That leaves owners in the dark, locks them out of future parts access, because those parts are going to the American Lease vehicles, makes future parts access that much more prohibitively expensive, and creates an opposing force in a licensed holder of the source code and access to cloud services that owners just don't have. Also, things owners don't have are warranties, a place to get repairs, or any confirmation that this recall will be resolved by Fisker ever. The Inside EVs article puts it right here in black and white. Soon the group realized that, with so many large creditors in the mix, a warranty wouldn't be realistic. Okay, the reality is we're probably not going to get that. What's significantly more important is the ability for us to continue using our cars. But at what cost?
Bruh.
And remember, parts and all that, the American Lease deal basically shuts out all of your boutique repair people, like the Fisker King, because typically, once this bankruptcy was over, Fisker King would reach out and say, okay, I'm going to use my connections to find what parts are out there and what unused, unfinished, broken vehicles are out there that I can start to use as transplants. But all of those just got sold to American Lease. American Lease is now the aftermarket. Seriously, what cost? Resnick adds insult to injury for owners as he details the resolution for the water pump failure.
They are being done through American Leasing as a buyer, as well as using Fisker employees. So that will be done, maybe 200 cars per week, and as that is done, then the sales will happen.
So while owners wait indefinitely for their Oceans to become bricks in anticipation of this failure, unsold Oceans get all of the remaining Fisker manpower in order to resolve the error, and complete recall-free cars go to American Lease only. Resnick highlights the sentiments of the secured lender.
But the secured lender is very supportive of this sale.
Of course they are.
Next, Resnick tries to pitch the sale to American Lease as a benefit to owners.
That engaging in this sale, getting the proceeds in, and being able to manage this case in an advantageous way is the best thing we can do to try to help the owners in the long run.
Resnick also gets himself in trouble here as he mentions the titling issues will be resolved. Hang on to that for later.
Also, in terms of the JPF title issues, we have been in touch with Mr. Tarr, and we fully expect to resolve those issues well in advance of the hearing.
Richendorfer then asks to question DiDonato about the funds available for payroll.
The U.S. trustee would like to question the witness that was offered by Mr. Resnick, because I don't know if the question is that there is no money for it, just there isn't approval by the lender to use cash collateral to make the next payroll, which it's a big difference.
By the time DiDonato hits the stand, it becomes clear that there are way more non-exempt salary employees than any other type, and that some of these employees, including Henrik and Gita Fisker, might miss a paycheck without the expeditious nature of this sale.
We've had exempt and non-exempt employees. The exempt and non-exempt employees cycle on different weeks.
Okay, so who is going to receive the benefit of the 1.331 that goes to ADP this Friday?
The non-exempt are salary employees.
Does the 150 employees or non-exempt employees include Mr. Fisker?
They do.
After extensive discussion on the timing of payroll and the unrestricted cash, the discussion moves to the restricted cash.
Are those accounts at JP Morgan Chase?
Yes.
And do any of those accounts relate to issues concerning title that has not been yet delivered?
There is an amount also at JPM, I believe, of $1.1 million.
Like these titling issues for the $1.1 million, are these cars that were already delivered?
Yes, ma'am.
Richendorfer then points out that $1.1 million is restricted because Fisker hasn't fixed the titles for owners. After DiDonato is dismissed, Richendorfer argues that Fisker does have the cash to make payroll, but it is restricted. She also questions the number of salary employees that Fisker still employs.
I don't understand why the debtor still has 125 non-exempt employees. Your Honor, also, we've heard from Mr. Resnick about how they're going to resolve all of these title issues, and there's 1.1 million sitting there. So, Your Honor, in other words, the long and the short of it is that there are ways in which funds can be captured, which means that the motion can be heard at least the following week.
The judge asks Resnick for more clarity, and after being unable to provide it, Resnick asks for a recess, which is granted.
Okay, counsel, we're back on the record. Was the time useful?
No. I got no magic way of doing the numbers right now, Your Honor, unfortunately, because the budgets we've been receiving, my auditor has not been able to reconcile.
After the recess, Resnick amends the urgency of the original timeline, saying that a couple days later than they were asking would be all right. And then the judge issues his decision.
I'm going to schedule a hearing for next Thursday at 3 p.m. I'm going to permit objections to be filed by noon that day. We have a third cash collateral hearing scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. We're going to go ahead with that hearing by Zoom. and we're going to add on to that a status conference for this matter. And I would hope and expect that the time between now and Tuesday can be put to good use for talking with the committee and for talking with Ms. Richendorfer and getting some clarity on this. And if any party comes forward and opposes going forward on Thursday, I'll consider at that point whether we need to adjourn it. Does that make sense?
The parties agree that it makes sense.
I would expect, too, that going into that hearing, we're going to have a cash collateral budget attached to that order, so we should have a sense of what's actually going out during the period covered by that third cash collateral footer.
So what have we learned? Fisker and American Lease have signed a purchase agreement. The agreement is for the remaining Oceans, new, previously titled, and damaged, to be sold for $46 million. American Lease agrees to pay for the preparation of the cars using their facilities and Fisker employees, and that includes this June 26th water pump circuit board recall. Updates for cars in the sale will not ever move past 2.1, at least from Fisker. It's kind of a death sentence for all future updates. Of course, if you thought you were going to get 3.0, you might have been in need of this reality check anyway. However, even though 2.1 is all they get, source code, proprietary software, operating elements, existing developer work, and access to subscription-based services and related software will all be provided by Fisker. Not to you, the owner, to American Lease. Payroll is like $1 million a week, so if bankruptcy takes more than a year after the sale of these vehicles, my math says there's nothing for anyone. The next New York City taxi could be the Fisker Ocean. It was the yellow cab, it's currently the Toyota Camry. It will of course be an Uber or a Lyft, but they could be hitting the streets. The Fisker Owners Association has representation. The unsecured creditors now have a committee to fight for assets, and Fisker tried to sell their only real assets out from under all the creditors before they could successfully organize. Finally, owners took some serious L's from this sale, especially regarding parts availability, because the aftermarket now becomes only currently owned Oceans. But Fisker would continue to exist for the time being, which is good news for those owners who are stuck. That's all for this one. If you want to learn about charging etiquette, I've got an entire website dedicated to it. Join Patreon or become a YouTube member for early access to videos. Subscribe for more, and we'll see you on the next one.
Hey! Smash the like button!
Thank you.